To design, build, sell and store and fire all the bombs and guns to defend your holy empire. There are children hungry, children sick and dying. There are mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers crying. They're only pawns in your play of power and corruption. Slowly starve them, your new weapon of mass destruction. And prove to me, America, that you care. And prove to me, America, you're aware. Who's dying for your freedom in this land? Who pays the cost for the liberties you demand?
Is it for freedom? Sarah Thompson. We turn now to the Pacific island of Guam, where the United States is planning an enormous military buildup to the tune of $15 billion. The project would turn the 30-mile-long island into a major hub for U.S. military operations in the Pacific. It has been described as the largest military buildup in recent history and could bring as many as 50,000 people to the tiny island. On Capitol Hill, the conversation has been restricted to whether the jobs expected from the military construction should go to the mainland Americans, foreign workers, or Guam residents. But we rarely hear the voices and concerns of the indigenous people of Guam, who constitute over a third of the island's population. We're joined now by a civil rights attorney from the Chamoru Nation in Guam, Julian Aguon, who is the author of 3 books, including The Fire This Time, Stories of Life Under U.S. Occupation, and What We Bury at Night, Disposable Humanity. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, this latest buildup, how did this develop? It is now troops that are being moved from Okinawa by the United States to Guam. Could you talk a little bit about the decision in recent years on this buildup?
Okay, the military buildup was first announced in 2005. Basically, the United States had made a bilateral agreement with the Japanese government to transfer some 7,000 U.S. Marines from Okinawa to Guam, in large part due to Okinawan mass protests against military presence, because they shoulder roughly 70% of the U.S. military presence in all of Japan in Okinawa. So that was in 2005. Fast forward to 2009, we see that the U.S. has recently announced that the number, it keeps ballooning. It's really unbelievable, because now it's set to include 8,000 U.S. Marines and their 9,000 dependents, another 1,000 from troops from South Korea, as well as an outside foreign labor workforce estimated upwards of 20,000 people. So we're talking about a 4 to 5 year injection of a population increase of 20% in 5 years. So that's really what we're concerned about. The indigenous Chamorro community of Guam is that we haven't exercised self-determination yet. Guam remains one of only 16 non-self-governing territories, i.e. UN-recognized colonies of the world. We don't even vote for the U.S. president. We have no effective, meaningful representation in the U.S. Congress. And the entire buildup was announced, and it was basically any Chamorro consideration was really de facto. We're never really at the table. We were just informed by the U.S. that they were going to bring an outside population of these many tens of thousands of people. And the entire population of Guam is set roughly at 171,000 only. And the Chamorro population makes up roughly 37% of that population. So really, this demographic change will have irreversible consequences. And we don't even have the infrastructure, and no money has been in essence promised to the government.
Well, your country, of course, is the status of your country is familiar to me as an unincorporated territory, because, of course, I was born in another unincorporated territorial colony of the United States, Puerto Rico, and both of our countries were came under U.S. sovereignty at the same time, and as a result of the Spanish-American War. Could you talk a little bit about the history of Guam and the lives of your people under U.S. rule for the last more than a century now?
Okay. Well, Guam is one of the longest colonized islands in the Pacific. We were colonized by Spain for almost 300 years, and then by the United States. We got ceded to the United States under the 1898 Treaty of Paris, along with Cuba, Philippines, Puerto Rico, as you know. So since 1898 until present, with the exception of a 3-year, 1941 to 1944, we were occupied by the Japanese imperial forces during World War II, which is a completely other story, which was also horrific. But we basically have been under U.S. colonization since 1898 until the present. So we're actually coming on 500 years of uninterrupted colonization. And that's sort of why being even on this program is so precious for us, because we never ever get a word in edgewise, and basically the U.S. uses language all the time to disappear us. We're often called where America's day begins, possession, even according to U.S. court cases, possession. We're essentially an instrumentality of the federal government, or they use words like unsinkable aircraft carrier now, or tip of the spear. All of this language is, you know, it's really clever, and it just disappears us. And so the outside world, including the mainland United States, really, they're allowed to sort of forget that there are people there. There are only ghosts. So that's been our experience, and with the military buildup has been no different. We actually situate the current U.S. military buildup as the latest in a very long line of covenant breaches on the part of the United States. Because in 1946, the U.S. placed Guam on the UN list of non-self-governing territories, and basically assumed a, quote, sacred trust obligation under international law by virtue of Article 73 of the UN Charter to guide Guam toward self-determination. And now, with the military buildup, which it really seeks to pack the last punch. It will be decisive because it is so large and it's so enormous. And basically the way I see it is the knees of my people are buckling. We're not going to be able to withstand so much more weight.
And in terms of the other aspect of life in Guam that most Americans don't know about, the radiation exposure that your islands were subjected to in the World War II, post-World War II era?
Well, the most well-known, or the most notorious actually, is the nuclear campaign launched by the United States in our neighboring islands. Because Guam is part of a region of the Pacific, the Western Pacific, known as Micronesia, which includes the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of Palau, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and this Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. Actually, Guam, it's only 30 miles long, but it really is the largest and southernmost island in its own natural archipelago, the Mariana Island chain. So we were one people up until 1898. So that's another reason why that date is so important, because it basically politically divided us. In 1898, Guam was taken by the U.S. and CNMI went to Germany. So we're in that part of the region. Between 1946 to 1958, the U.S. dropped more than 60 nuclear weapons on the people of the Marshall Islands. One bomb, the most notorious, Bravo, that shot, the latest estimate, I speak with senators over there, including Tony DeBroom of the Marshall Islands, who's been such a long-standing advocate in the Marshall Islands, now puts this is the number used. That bomb dropped only 1,200 miles from Guam, is the equivalent of 1.6 or 1.7 Hiroshima bombs every day for 12 years. That's its total radioactive capacity. And Guam being so close and downwind, we have downwind exposure. And that's yet another reason why we're always at the Congress, throwing ourselves on the funeral pyre of the U.S. Congress or the UN. Like, we were on this trip and we went to the United Nations as well to basically keep articulating these rights, or trying to get, at least as far as the U.S. is concerned, trying to get compensation for radiation exposure. And there's no real acknowledgement. It hasn't happened yet. The Chamoru people of Guam experience such an alarmingly high rate of cancer. So that's a legacy.
And of course, in Congress itself, your representation is limited to one non-voting representative?
Yes, one non-voting representative.
So the people of Guam are U.S. citizens but cannot vote in any kind of federal elections at all?
The document that purports to be our foundational or constitutional document is actually a document passed by the U.S. Congress, or the Organic Act of 1915, passed on August 1st, 1950. And basically, by virtue of that act, we are statutory citizens. U.S. citizenship was extended to us. However, we're not allowed to vote for the U.S. president, and we're not allowed to have an effective voting representative in the U.S. Congress. And that's what's so ironic. You hear about, I just heard about the Nobel Peace Prize being awarded to Obama, and that's great. But for us, it's really like the U.S. has, really justified its current war on terror. I mean, employing all of the classic language of human rights and international law, and that was my specialty area in law school, international law and human rights, and for indigenous people specifically, as well as for colonized peoples. And we don't even have to necessarily talk about human rights in Guam. We'll settle for civil rights. We just want to vote for president. So, I mean, even in America's own backyard, nuclear contamination is not cleaned up. We can't vote for president. We can't really make changes in the U.S. Congress, yet